Hey Dirt Magicians, ever wondered if all of the things you're adding to your soil for nutrients and amendments are actually doing anything? We're constantly being inundated with adding this new micro fertilizer or amendment is going to make our vegetables stronger and healthier. But are they actually? Well, because of my education in soil science, when we first came to Growville back in 2021, I had all of our vegetable gardeners get a soil nutrient test. And I have to say, they were shocked at the results, both in terms of what they were deficient in their soil and also what they had way too much of in terms of nutrients. So in this video, we are going to share the top most interesting results, 3 of them, for a soil nutrient test. We'll share what they are, what they did after they found out their results, and make sure you stay right to the very end where I give you a summary of what those results mean for you and your soil as a vegetable gardener. So the first soil test we did is in Stella's yard, where I'm sitting now. Now, Stella was really into different fertilizers and nutrients, and she had lots of questions about the different amendments she was adding. She had carrot-specific fertilizers, tomato and cucumber, and she was wondering if what the content was good for those vegetables. She also had heard about different trace mineral amendments, so she was adding something called azomite, which is a mineral from Utah that's supposed to be really good for trace minerals. Now the question is, did she need all of these things? Let's look at the results. In order to make reading the soil test easier, I've taken all of the numbers that we've gotten from our soil tests, as well as the numbers you'd want to find in a soil test with really healthy soil that has all of the nutrients needed. And I've created a fraction so that we're not having to read numbers ranging from 2 to 5,000. If that was complicated to understand, just know that the line across the graph is the record amount that we want in our soil. So everything above it means we've got more than enough nutrients, and everything below means we are missing in those nutrients. So Stella was really shocked to find that actually she had almost 1 to 2 times the amount of nutrients that she needed in her soil. Now, is this abundance in nutrients a bad thing? No, not really. It just means that all of those vegetable-specific fertilizers that she was adding are really not doing anything. It's like taking vitamins when you don't need them. They're just getting flushed through the system, so she's kind of wasting her money. Also, Dirt Magicians, if you have any questions about these soil tests or anything to do with soil, please let us know in the comments. I love nerding out about soil. Now, there is one nutrient that is low in her soil, and that nutrient is nitrogen, as you can see here. This is not surprising, as nitrogen is typically needed by the plants in the largest quantity because it is part of chlorophyll and photosynthesis. It also makes a lot of sense, specifically in the Pacific Northwest, that nitrogen would be low because we get so much heavy rainfall over the winter, and of the nutrients, nitrogen is far more water soluble than the others, so we lose a lot of it through those winter months. So adding a nitrogen source and it being low in the soil makes complete sense. So what has she done moving forward? Because the organic matter in her beds is also quite high, all she's really needed to add in the last few years has been a nitrogen source. So she chose feather meal for her source, and she just adds that every spring before planting, and then also to some of her more heavy feeding vegetables like tomatoes and cucumbers. If you want to know more about the various soil nutrients and also soil health, then we have a mini course for you, which is meant to empower you to understand all of the components for a healthy vegetable garden soil. In this mini course, we talk about the different soil nutrients, also soil structure, heavy metals, and how to manage your soil appropriately for the best vegetables. Go to the description box for a link to the mini course to find out more. All right, on to the next house, which has a number of nutrient deficiencies in their soil, which are very common for this area of the world. Let's go check it out. Our second soil test that we're going to talk about is here in Elle's yard. And Elle has some very unique beds in that they're half using the local native soil and half built up. So she's also imported some soil from a local company. Now, in the past, the way that she's amended her soils every spring is by adding a manure from a local farm. So let's find out, has that been enough for her vegetables? As a reminder, the line here on the graph signifies the optimal amount of each nutrient we want to find in the soil when we do a test. As we can see, for the most part, Elle has enough of many of the nutrients.
However, there are a few deficiencies I want to talk about. The first one is nitrogen, which is not surprising as we saw the same thing in Stella's soil as well, and I explained why. But one that isn't interesting is potassium, and that's because the part of the Pacific Northwest that we are living in actually has low amounts of potassium in the mineral composition of the soil and the bedrock, etc. So that's why we're seeing it here in her soil test. Another interesting nutrient that is low is boron. Now, boron is really unique because it's a micronutrient, so it's only needed in really small amounts, but it is needed. It plays a key role in cell wall formation in our plants themselves. And the reason that it's likely deficient is because here in the Pacific Northwest, it rains a lot over the winter, and boron, like nitrogen, is very water soluble, so it can flush out of the soil very quickly.
So how did Elle fix these nutrient deficiencies? Well, for her nitrogen and her potassium, she used a fish fertilizer, as the fish fertilizer is really high in both of those two nutrients. And for our channel, a really good nutrient amendment is the like button. It lets us know that we're creating content that's valuable to you. Also, if you're interested in seeing more content around what other gardeners do, once a month we head to Growville and shoot how other vegetable gardeners do things. So hit that subscribe and turn all notifications on for more content like that. All right, back to nutrient deficiencies here in this garden. So for her boron, she added something that's called borax, which is actually a cleaning agent, but it's also a natural mineral that we can add to the soils. However, boron's really tricky in that it is needed and it does help plants grow, but if you add too much, it very quickly becomes toxic to the soil and to the different plants growing. So you really only need about 1 to 2 grams in a watering can full of water to apply boron. And once had done that to her garden beds, she actually found that things like her broccoli and her cauliflower started to head a lot better. All right, on to our final soil test yard, which was a brand new vegetable garden when we started. It had never had any plants in it before. All right, so our final stop is here in Ashton and Bern's yard. And when we started Growville, Ashton built these beds from scratch. But of course, he had to bring in some soil to fill them. So he found a local soil company that was advertising a vegetable-specific soil mix. So before we added anything to the soil, we did a nutrient test. And here's what we found.
Wow, okay, so there are a lot of nutrients in this soil. That is crazy. Now, the one that blows my mind is the phosphorus. It is 10 times at least the amount that is needed in a soil. Now, this isn't going to necessarily harm any of our vegetable plants. However, the runoff of those nutrients into nearby waterways can cause what's called an algal bloom, which occurs when a bunch of phosphorus is dumped into them, and we definitely don't want that. So I would not add any kind of a manure as a fertilizer, as manures are really high in phosphorus. But of course, like all the other soils we've seen, nitrogen is looking low there.
Since they didn't want to use an animal byproduct as a nitrogen fertilizer, which is where a lot of nitrogen comes from, they started to use alfalfa meal to supplement the nitrogen here in their garden beds. So what do these soil tests that we did here in Burkeville mean for you as a gardener? There are 4 things you might want to consider. Firstly, if you are a prolific gardener, or if you've been into soil and you've been buying a lot of different amendments, you're likely wasting some of that money and not needing some of those nutrients. I highly recommend getting a soil test. Although these can be expensive, you don't have to do them every year, and they're likely going to save you a lot of money on different soil amendments down the road. 2, if you have in the past been using manures and different composts into your garden, you likely have a quite high phosphorus content. I have analyzed dozens of soil tests, not only of gardeners, but also farmers, and those who use manure and compost almost always have high phosphorus. So if you're needing to add other nutrients, just try and avoid ones that are high in phosphorus as well. While excess phosphorus in the soil isn't necessarily going to harm our plants in any way, any runoff from our garden beds that go into waterways can cause those algal blooms that I already mentioned, harming them. And while one garden is probably not going to have a huge impact on waterways, hopefully more and more of us will keep gardening, and if we have too many, it's that cumulative impact where phosphorus becomes an issue. If you're not ready to fork out the money for a soil test, one thing you can try is a Google search of your area and the common mineral deficiencies in the soil to give you some clues as to what nutrients you might be deficient in. I can't guarantee that this will come up with anything helpful, but it doesn't hurt to try, especially if you live in a high agricultural area. And the fourth and last consideration for you is to check out our mini soil course all about soil health for your vegetable garden. Click in the description box below for a link to that course.